first question about happiness from a listener named Andrea.
Hey Mel, it's Andrea. Can you talk about happiness? I can't think of a time that I have felt true happiness. I'm just living, I guess. I feel that something is missing, and I believe it's happiness.
Mm. Andrea, I love the way you framed that question. And for you listening, I'm going to put that question right back to you. Can you think of a time that you felt true happiness? Or are you like most people, that you feel like something is missing from your life and you can't quite put your finger on it? When I hear Andrea's question, I can totally relate to it because I know I felt the way that she's feeling. And one of the mistakes that I was making when I felt like something was missing is I, of course, went on the search. I got to find happiness. And here's the first piece of research that I want to talk about. Research says that happiness, or that feeling that we're seeking of happiness, it's often fleeting because we are searching for happiness in the wrong places. In fact, researchers at Rutgers and the University of Toronto found that people who pursue happiness, you're chasing it, you're looking for it outside yourself, you often feel like you don't have enough time in the day. And this paradoxically makes you feel unhappy. Because when you feel like you don't have enough time in the day because you're constantly chasing all these things outside of you, you start to feel like you're not in control of your life. And I think that's what Andrea is talking about, that we're all chasing down some version of happiness that we think we're supposed to be chasing, right? That society has marketed some version of life to us. And that's why you probably are familiar with that phrase, I'll be happy when. We all succumb to that thinking. I'll be happy when I lose the weight, I fall in love, I land that dream job, I pay off my bills, I get into my dream school, I find the perfect apartment. And there's multiple problems with thinking like this. First of all, if you think that you'll be happier when you achieve something, what always happens is when you achieve it, you're not as happy as you thought you would be. And then all of a sudden, because you don't have this big goal in front of you anymore, your happiness plummets. And so the research is very, very clear that these big events that we're chasing, that we think are going to give us a boost of happiness, that happiness doesn't last. And there's a second reason why this kind of thinking, that you'll be happy at some point in the future, why this is really problematic. It's because you are anchoring your happiness on something that hasn't happened yet. That means your happiness is something you have to earn. Your happiness is something that's outside of you. And that's not what happiness is at all. Happiness is always within your control. Happiness is something that you want to cultivate in your life where you are right now. And the good news is, you don't have to wait to be happy when. You can learn to be happier now. So let me explain, based on the research, how happiness works when it comes to you individually. So there's this formula that's supported by the science that says you have 100% capacity for happiness. That's what you got. Your cup can be full and runneth over. 100%, baby. Happiness is for you. 50% of that capacity is genetics. That's your default. So you might be somebody that has 50% genetics that are preset to being very sunny and kind of bubbly and happy. Or 50% of your genetics might be like, meh, you're kind of grumpy. That's okay, because you still have the other 50% to play with. 10% of the rest is based on the circumstances that you're facing right now. And 40% of happiness, period, in your life right now is completely under your control. And that's what we're going to focus on, because that's awesome. No matter what kind of family you were born into, no matter what you're facing right now in your life, 40% of your capacity for happiness right now completely in your control. And so before we go forward, I want to make sure that as we're talking, that we're in complete agreement about what the word happiness means. Because when you and I use the word happy or happiness, we might be saying totally different things. There's a huge spectrum when people use this word. Researchers even talk about the fact that happiness is all over the map. Some people, when they say happiness, they mean laughing and having a good time. Other people mean fulfillment or thriving or kicking ass in life. And so you and I are going to have a conversation right now about what you mean when you say happiness. Where are you on the spectrum between laughter and having a great time to feeling completely fulfilled and thriving in life? And so, in order for you and I to get on the same page, I'm going to bring a metaphor in. You know Mel Robbins, she loves her metaphors, she loves her visual explanations for these big, heady concepts. And thankfully, I got a great one for happiness. So, whenever you hear the word happiness, I want you to think about an ocean. There are waves in an ocean, and that's one spectrum of happiness. And waves come and they go. And having fun in the waves requires you to jump in the waves, to get into the ocean, to decide that you're going to go have fun. But then if you think about the ocean, there are days that there's no waves at all. It's perfectly still. And the ocean itself and your ability to stand in that ocean, to float and to swim, that's a deeper form of happiness. Or what about the days where the ocean is stormy and you wouldn't dare go in? But on those days that you're on the beach, aren't you so present to the wind, to the salt, to the waves crashing on the beach? That's what I want you to think about. That huge range of how an ocean shows up. And I love this metaphor of an ocean for happiness, the waves being fun, and the still ocean being your ability to just experience happiness, and you being present even on the stormiest days to the little details. I love this range because it ties right back to all of the research, but it gives us a visual. I want to go into some of the other, I guess, chemicals that you hear associated with the brain and have you explain to us what they are and why they're important for happiness, for brain health. Let's talk about serotonin. What is it and why is it important?
Serotonin is hugely important for many different functions in the brain, but for happiness, for flexibility, and respect. And respect's the ones that fools people. But when your serotonin levels are low, you more easily feel disrespected. And if you have a social fight or you feel diminished in some way, your serotonin levels drop. And when serotonin levels go low, people tend to worry. They get stuck on negative thoughts, negative behaviors. They tend to be argumentative and oppositional. And if things don't go their way, they get upset, which on the surface can appear selfish, but it's really not selfish. It's rigid. And boosting serotonin with like bright light therapy, which is why it's so important to get sunshine. And while, as we go into the holidays, time change happens just at the wrong time, right? As we get less sunlight and it gets colder outside, we just, then got a bomb dropped on us. Like all of a sudden you lose an hour a day of light. And light is so important.
Let me back us up a second. So does your brain create serotonin? Is that what is the function of serotonin in the brain?
So your gut makes about 90% of the serotonin in your body, but it doesn't go directly into your brain. Your brain creates serotonin from the amino acid precursor called tryptophan. And that's why often eating tryptophan-rich foods,
like turkey,
can be helpful, but not in a ketogenic way. You have to eat tryptophan-rich foods with a carbohydrate. because you need an insulin response to drive tryptophan into the brain. So turkey and sweet potatoes together is a great combination to boost your mood.
So when you have high levels of serotonin, how does that impact you?
We tend to be happy. You're a little bit less motivated. You sort of don't care that much. I remember when Prozac first came on to the market, and I would give it to some of my depressed patients, and they would say they would be less depressed, but also less motivated. Because as tryptophan goes up, dopamine, another chemical we should talk about, goes down. They have this sort of counterbalancing effect, which is why, and this is really interesting for anyone who grew up in an alcoholic home. I studied children and grandchildren of alcoholics. They often have low levels of both serotonin and dopamine. And so if I just raise one, I make them better in some ways, but worse in other ways. So a lot of people who take SSRIs, they go, well, I'm happier, but I don't really care that much. I had one guy tell me he wasn't doing his taxes, and he's like, no, this is going to be a problem. So I had to rebalance his medication.
So is serotonin sort of the happiness one, and dopamine is the motivation and drive one? Is that their relationship?
Well, they're both. You think of both of them involved in happiness. And dopamine is the molecule of more. It's when you get dopamine, you go, oh, I like that. And the problem is the more you get, the more you want. And then it turns into trouble. We are wearing out our dopamine centers in the brain in our society with our phones and social media and the nonstop video games and texting. It's we're being thrilled to death, which ultimately wears out the pleasure centers in the brain. So you have to be very careful. I often talk to people about drip dopamine. Don't dump it.
What does that mean? Drip dopamine, don't dump it.
So you want little tiny little tiny bursts of dopamine, not a big splash. So for example, cocaine, big splash of dopamine, and you go, whoa. But the problem is you have none left, and then you get depressed, which you then start using. Alcohol is the same way. Alcohol dumps dopamine. Nicotine, vaping dumps dopamine. Scary movies dump dopamine. Falling in love dumps dopamine. You want to drip it, holding Tana's hand, getting eye contact, looking for what I call the micro moments of happiness. So much more important. And new love is totally dumping dopamine. So you always, whenever you just fall in love, you need to whoa, this is really awesome. Let me ride this out before I make any big decisions.
So would an example of dripping dopamine include the two micro habits you talked about? One being waking up in the morning and saying, I'm going to make it a great day. How am I going to do that? And also at the end of the day, going on that treasure hunt for what went right?
Yes.
Excellent. How can you tell if you have low dopamine?
If you're tired, if you find that you're unmotivated, if you're sad, and you just don't have the motivation to get done what you want to get done. And, I'm in Justin Bieber's docuseries Seasons, and, I've been his doctor for a long time, and they just wore that boy's dopamine centers out. And then, when you become famous like that, you have access to women, to drugs, to video games, and just completely, almost killed that boy, and they deadened his pleasure centers. But the good news is, even if you've been bad to your brain, by doing the right things, your brain we call it neuroplastic, is it can be better even in a matter of months.
Wow. We've talked about supplements. We've talked about some micro habits. What are 3 simple ways to increase dopamine?
Cold showers will do it. So I just took a shower before I did it, and I always finished with like 2 minutes. I turn it all the way cold because cold therapy has been shown to increase both norepinephrine, another neurotransmitter, and dopamine. Eating tyrosine rich foods. So we talked about tryptophan, the amino acid building block for serotonin. Tyrosine is the amino acid building block for dopamine. So things like almonds and eggs and beans and fish and chicken, dark chocolate. But you don't want to do that with an insulin response or with a carbohydrate. And so this is where a higher protein, lower carbohydrate diet can be helpful. Exercise also does it, and certain supplements like tyrosine. So tyrosine is a supplement, and it's the amino acid building block for dopamine.
So is there any like certain times of day where your dopamine is higher or lower just naturally?
In the morning,
And is the same true with serotonin?
in the evening.
Okay. So to explain that to us and then how we can use something natural to boost it.
So everybody's circadian rhythm or the
Mhm.
rhythm of their energy is different. There are morning larks and night owls, and you sort of have to know what you are. A lot of my ADD patients are night owls, and society is sort of biased against them, because school starts early, work starts early for a lot of people. But you just have to know your rhythm. And if your dopamine is high in the morning, that's when you want to focus and get work done. If it tends to be higher later in the day, know your rhythm. Serotonin often helps people sleep. And in our supplement, Put Me to Sleep, we actually have 5-HTP, which is the amino acid precursor, even closer to serotonin than tryptophan. And for a lot of people, it helps decrease worry and promote sleep.
Wow. I'm like slightly overwhelmed. I don't even know where to start in terms of like how to boost my serotonin naturally, how to boost my dopamine naturally. So is there a way to simplify this? Like, you just kind of talked about your circadian rhythm and understanding if you're a night owl or you're a morning person. So if you're a morning person and you kind of wake up and you're naturally more motivated, are there certain things you should do first thing in the morning to keep your dopamine levels high, to stay focused, to promote your brain health?
So one thing I really like, especially as we start into, later fall and winter, is morning bright light.
Okay.
And so people who have seasonal affective disorder, so winter blues, that morning bright light therapy, and you can actually get these therapy lamps. I make one called our Bright Minds therapy lamp, 10,000 lux. So it's bright.
Okay.
Put it, don't look at it, put it like an arm's length away from you while you're putting on your makeup or having breakfast, if you have breakfast, for 20 or 30 minutes in the morning. Super simple, can significantly improve dopamine, your energy, mood, and cognitive function. Exercise, whether you want to increase serotonin or dopamine, it does both. Walk like you're late for 45 minutes, 4 or 5 times a week. Super simple, bright light, exercise, just incredibly helpful. And this is very important. I just turned 68 this year. And it's very clear to me that the stronger you are as you age, the less likely you are to get Alzheimer's disease, but it's really for older people, it's frailty that kills them almost more than anything else. So light, exercise, simple supplements, and know you can eat in certain ways to boost the neurotransmitters in your brain.
So when you say frailty and strength, are you also recommending, in addition to the 30 to 40 minutes of walking as if you're late 3 or 4 times a week, that you also add in strength training?
You bet. I think it's absolutely critical for men and for women. Your muscles are your protein reserve. So one of my young doctors went to Hawaii on vacation and got this terrible infection that almost killed him.
Oh,
And
wow.
the reason he didn't die is he was strong when he went into that illness and had the protein reserve muscle on his body. And yeah, no, I remember the day when in the hospital, I expected I was going to get a call. He died in the middle of the night because he just got this wicked infection from jumping into a natural pool in Hawaii. But he survived and he's done great because it's the protein reserve or the brain reserve you bring into an illness or an accident that determines how you're going to do after it. I mean, you probably, seen, one person gets into a car accident and they come out of it just fine. Another one's permanently damaged. Same accident. Why? Because it's the level of brain health or brain reserve they brought into the accident that often determines the outcome. So every single day of your life, from my perspective, every single day of your life, you should be boosting your brain reserve.
So here's what we're going to do. You and me, we're bringing the fun. And rule number 1, stop focusing on all the logistics. Focus on the laughter. I'm not kidding about this. I want you to weave laughter into the logistics. If you did the work ahead of time to plan for fun and to make sure it's fun, it will be fun. And, when I say don't just focus on the logistics, also focus on the laughter, I want to tell you a quick story. So we're hosting Thanksgiving this year, and my husband, thank God, is handling the logistics. And so he put together an email and he, assigned all the things out that everybody was doing. And yeah, bring the dogs and, bring a bathing suit and ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba. And everybody replies back, excited to see you. And we're so excited to get together. And so now as the emails are starting to fly, I'm starting to feel excited. But everybody's just kind of commenting on the logistics. We'll be there Thursday. We'll be there Wednesday night. We're going to bring the dog. Blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, our son Oakley replies. And he replies in all caps, "People, we are going to destroy this feast!" Exclamation point. And I just laughed out loud. That could be you. Why not reply to the family logistics text chain with a hilarious GIF of somebody dancing with a turkey? Why not put in a hilarious photo of somebody in the family? Why not bring the fun? So don't just focus on the logistics. Make sure you focus on the laughter too. Now, let's talk about step 2. How do you stop falling into the, fun will just happen spontaneity category, and you fall into the, I'm going to make this fun thing happen category? Well, let's look at the research. People who are happy do things that make them happy. That's one of those studies where I'm like, yeah, duh. But then you're like, oh, no wonder I'm not happy. I'm not doing anything or prioritizing happiness. They work at things that make them happy. And it makes sense because when you try things that make you happier, you're a happier person. Well, guess what? The exact same research relates to fun. It's seriously so obvious, it's kind of stupid, but let's have some fun with it, right? Let's not be embarrassed. Your life becomes fun when you plan things that are fun to you. Or even when normal things. You just bring a fun attitude like our son did to the email chain. All caps, exclamation, let's go, people. And on that note, I want to share a story with you about the power of bringing the fun, okay? Don't wait for somebody else to do it. Thankfully, we have somebody in our family who's incredible at this. Our oldest daughter, Sawyer, who's 23 years old, this woman always brings the fun. I mean, she is always doing something really fun with her friends. I can give you a few examples. There was one year where she and her friends were out in Breckenridge, Colorado, and I was looking at the photos online, and they were out at bars in these colonial costumes, literally, like think Holly Hobby, bonnets, prairie dress, apron. They had gone on a bar crawl in costume, like looking like women from a colonial era, like Little House on the Prairie. It was such a riot that people all over Breckenridge were stopping them. They were featured on the Breckenridge Facebook page. People were taking photos with them. I mean, talk about bringing the fun. That's hilarious. I mean, I'd never think to order costumes and go on a themed bar crawl. Who does that? Well, apparently people who have fun do that. Another thing that she did recently is we had all of her college friends from Boston College up with their moms for a big mother-daughter weekend. And when we found out that one of the moms, who was a widow, had just gotten engaged to her boyfriend, Sawyer turned to me and said, "Let's throw a wedding." I'm like, "Throw a wedding?" She's like, "Yeah, we're going to throw a wedding." And sure enough, impromptu, they made a sash for the mom. We made a veil out of a paper towel, like a long thing of paper towel, and flowers out of like foil. And then we blew bubbles, and we had her daughter, who was wearing this huge foam hat, walk her down the aisle in our living room. And then Sawyer it was hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. Why? She brought the fun. When she heard something, she leaned into it, and we just it was just amazing. And she also did this repeatedly during quarantine. So quarantine was actually a really awesome time for our family once we got over the grieving and we settled into the routine of being together, because our kids brought the fun. Sawyer went through and made an entire chart for the month of March, and she came up with theme nights every other night. There was a family Olympics night. There was a bake-off where we divided up into teams, and we had to bake desserts, and we also had to dress up as chefs. I mean, it was super fun. But the most fun night was a night that I had never heard of. This is a theme you should steal. I love this. It's an anything but clothes dinner. And what does that mean? I didn't know either. It means you have dinner with your family wearing anything but clothes. You're not supposed to go nude. You are supposed to wear something other than clothes. So Sawyer, for example, took 2 huge king-size pillows and duct taped them all around her. So she put one in the front, one in the back, and then duct taped it. So that was her clothes, or her outfit. I can't remember what Oakley wore, and I can't remember what Kendall wore, oddly enough. But I took a champagne bottle box, and I put it across my chest. And the way that I fastened it to me is I poked holes in the top of it, and then I put a ribbon around it and hung it like a necklace, and then put duct tape on the side so it stayed in place. And then I made a pair of pants out of brown grocery store garbage bags, like 1 bag per leg, and then taped the front together. Now, Chris's outfit was something. Chris took a rubber pot lid. So, you know how you have like a metal pot lid? Well, somebody gave us once these like kind of rubber lids that you can put on top of dishes like in the summer so that flies can't get them, and it had like a little knob on it. He hung this thing across the front of him in front of his private parts. And that's all he wore, except for a pair of clogs and socks. I mean, when he came down the stairs, I almost had a heart attack. He had basically a pot lid across the front of him with a ribbon around his waist and clogs on. I'll tell you, we have laughed about that moment forever. And every time, we get into a fight, Chris threatens to wear that to the rehearsal dinner for one of our kids' weddings. What you're going to learn is that it's not that hard. It only takes one additional person to cause a major shift with you and have the fun be what everybody remembers. That's what we're going to do this holiday season. In fact, this is called the first follower theory. When you're the one person doing something out of the ordinary, people think you're crazy. Like, think about if you were to go in at the holidays and you're wearing some silly outfit. One of my favorite things to do is to buy themed blazers. You can get them really cheap on Amazon that are just ridiculous. Whether they have turkeys all over them or they have holiday decorations or they blink or whatever. Hilarious. If you're the only one wearing one, you might feel like an idiot. When two of you show up, now there's a party. That first follower that joins in with you turns you from you're an idiot to this looks like fun. Same's true about a dance floor, right? The first person that gets up, you're like, ooh, bad dance move. The second one, you're like, maybe I'll go, right? That's how you go from being the lone nut job to being the leader of the fun train, everybody. That's how fun becomes a movement. And so I'm going to take the first follower theory and I'm going to recruit someone to help me. And I want you to do the same. I am going to get our daughter Sawyer on the line because she is the CFO, the Chief Fun Officer of the Robbins family. And so as I get Sawyer on the line, I want you to think of your Chief Fun Officer, the person you're going to drag in to help you. Because if you both are like, come on, guys, everyone will be like, all right. And the fun bus will run the resignation and the cynicism right on over and make sure that fun bus has a damn good music dance party mix too, because that'll also bring the energy up. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we'll be right back because we're going to take a short break. But when we come back, I'm going to introduce you to the CFO, Chief Fun Officer of our family, Miss Sawyer Robbins. Oh, and we're going to talk about how the hell we're going to make our holidays fun. And in the process, we're going to give you some amazing ideas for how you can do the same. Okay, so Soy, thank you for being here because you know what? You are the funniest person in our family. Not only because you have the best sense of humor and you have the wittiest and driest sense of humor, but you also bring the fun. And you make our family so much better because of it. And I just love that about you.
Thank you.
I mean, literally, dude, everything. I mean, the foam hats, your idea. Dinner without clothing, your idea. A bar crawl in colonial costumes, your idea. Throwing a fake wedding, your idea. How the heck did you become so fun?
That is a tough question. Honestly, I feel like first off, I'm just very outgoing and obnoxious. So I think that kind of plays a role into it. But I think that I have been fortunate enough to be a part of friend groups where all we want to do is have fun and do things that are out of the ordinary. And I don't know, you can always just go to a bar, but it's more fun to dress up as like old women to go there. To just go alone. That's what I was for Halloween. I was a granny.
Can you please describe your costume to everybody? Because I think it's one of the best costumes I've ever seen.
I wore a wig and I got glasses and pearls and I got a cane and I was wearing like a sweater. I don't know. And I looked on probably 15 YouTube tutorials of how to make your makeup look like old women. And so I had like wrinkles all over me and a big mole. So, yeah.
Oh, and you know what other detail I loved?
What?
You had on like New Balance geriatric sneakers and you had a COVID mask hanging from one of those eyeglass things. I mean, the attention to detail. And that's why I wanted to talk to you, because this is the first year that our family is hosting Thanksgiving at Ground Zero for Thanksgiving, which is the Southern Vermont House.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there are traditions that used to go with the Southern Vermont House when your grandparents owned the house. And now that we are the owners of the house, and this is the first Thanksgiving that we're inviting the extended family to come, that we should probably get really intentional about mixing up the traditions and inserting a lot more fun.
Mm-hmm. That sounds great, honestly.
Why? Do you think that that holidays are normally not that fun?
No, I think they're fun. I love holidays. If I could, I would just have Christmas all year long. But the fact that Thanksgiving is always a good time in when politics are not talked about or money or people's like life. I don't know. I feel like all we talk about is the boring stuff and what everyone does for work. And then Uncle Tom does his accents and everyone laughs and we have the exact same memories told over and over again. And then we go to bed. So I don't know. I'm down for some more fun this year for sure.
I agree. So, can you give me some ideas? Because you're a way more creative thinker than I am. And I remember when we were quarantining, you came up with a chart of themed evenings that we were going to do as a family in order to mix up the doldrum and to create things to look forward to. One of the things that I want to really focus on next, because Jay unpacks the 4 phases of attraction, dreams, struggle, and trust in the book, is I think my favorite rule, honestly, of all 8 is number 4. Your partner is your
I
guru.
thought it would be. When you said your favorite rule, I was thinking it would be this
Why did
one.
you think that it
I
would
don't
be?
know. I just feel like obviously, you and Chris have such an incredible hard work based, like genuine, real relationship in marriage. And it's like, I think as you spend more time together, you start learning so much more through your partner and from your partner. And I don't know, I just felt it. It was intuitive. I was just like, Mel, yeah, I can see Mel being Chris's guru and I can see Chris being Mel's guru.
Will you explain what that means? Because I think when you
Yeah.
first hear your partner is your guru, I didn't realize what it meant because it
Yeah.
didn't mean what I thought it meant.
Yeah. And I want to encourage people to understand that this step comes as you deepen a relationship. This
Mhm.
isn't something you want on day one. Like if anyone's listening to that rule and you don't read the book and you're thinking, oh yeah, my partner's my business mentor or they're my coach or they're my therapist. Like that's not what I'm talking about
Right.
at all. What I'm saying is that as you deepen your friendship, as you deepen your relationship, as you actually get to know each other better, your partner becomes the one person who exposes all your flaws, all your weaknesses, and all your truths to you without even trying. And I'll give a personal example of this. When I first met Radhi, I didn't have anything. I didn't have a job. I was in $25,000 worth of debt. I didn't have any job offers or prospects. And I was being rejected by 40 different companies during the time we were dating. And so I would tutor economics and subjects that I was great at college and university to students, save up to pay for our dates. And I always felt intimidated that we'd go out on dates and I'd be with her friends or family and they'd be like, well, Jay, what are you doing? What are you up to? And I really had no answer because I'd just come out of being a monk and surprise, surprise, no one wants to hire a former monk. And then it was really interesting because as my career took off, and I've been with Radhi obviously since before, and then as my career took off, I started to hit these external milestones.
Yep.
And I'd hold them up almost, not physically, but mentally. I would hold them up and I'd be like, Radhi, love me for this. Look what I just achieved. I did this. Love me for this. And she wouldn't love me more for that. And so then I achieved something bigger and I'd be like, well, look at this. Look what I did. Look what I did for us. Look how amazing I am. Like, love me for this. And she didn't react differently. And so then I kept going and then I held it up. And it was at that point I realized there's only 2 truths. Either my wife doesn't love me, which I know wasn't true because she'd shown
Right.
me love in so many ways,
Right.
or that there was something I was missing. And so what I realized was I was trying to get my wife to love me for what I achieved when she actually loved me for who I am.
Hmm.
She didn't teach me that by getting out a whiteboard and drawing bullet points. She taught me that by loving me only for my essence and who I was. So every time she would acknowledge me or appreciate me, it was not about the views or the downloads or the amount of people that were commenting. It was that was never the stuff she congratulated. The thing she congratulated was, I really love what I learned from you in that moment today. Or I really loved how you dealt with that challenge. Or I saw that you were being criticized for this and I saw how you responded. That's what I love about you. So just in the way she loved me, she was teaching me how to love myself. And I think that your partner is the only person who can do that for you because they know you so intimately. But the interesting thing is, a guru, in the way I learned from a guru in ashram, in the way I studied, gurus don't judge. They don't critique. They're compassionate and empathetic. They don't complain and compare to show you your flaws. They reflect the truth back to you just by being present with you so that you can see yourself. And so a guru isn't a partner who's telling you what to do or manipulating and controlling you, because that's ownership. That's not a relationship. And I think
Ooh, hold on, everybody. There was another one. The monk is in the house, dropping the wisdom. I love making you laugh.
Oh gosh, you make me
But
laugh so much.
but
Yeah.
you just said that when somebody's controlling you and when somebody is, I would even add in nitpicking, criticizing,
Yeah.
manipulating, judging, being cold with you, silent treatment, that's ownership.
Yes.
Will you talk more about that? Because I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of people listening to you right now going, your marriage sounds amazing,
Yeah.
and my relationship sucks
Yeah.
because I do not have a partner that is like that. I have a partner that's criticizing me. I have a partner that is doing all those things that make me feel bad.
Yeah.
So talk to that
Yeah.
person and
Yeah.
this notion of partnership versus ownership.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we come into relationships based on the imprints that our parents gave us, as we talked about before, or even our first partners gave us. And we also have so much inside of us that's unresolved that comes out in 4 ways. And these 4 things are comparison, criticism, complaining, and control. We think that if we do these 4 things, we feel better about ourselves, our partner may change, and overall, this is the language we've learned in how to talk to anyone.
Right.
And so what we do is we compare them to someone else, thinking that if they know what one of our friends did for their anniversary, then our partner will get their act together.
Yeah.
No one in the history of comparison has ever changed their life because they were compared to someone else.
It's true.
You don't make someone act better by making them feel inferior. It doesn't work that way. People act better because they feel inspired to, they feel called to, they feel energized in their life, but we try and use comparison. If someone else is trying to control you, it can often come in the form of care. It can look like care, but it's actually control. And there's only one way to know. Is someone giving you care in the way you want to better you, or are they doing it to make you more comfortable and convenient for them? Are they telling you what to wear? Are they telling you which of your friends are a good influence on you? When you hear that, you think, oh, they might actually care about me. They might actually care about me because they're telling me these friends are a bad influence, these friends are a good influence. But wait a minute, I've never actually told them what I even do with these friends. I've never even told them. And by the way, I did some of this when I met Radhi. When I met Radhi, I would look at some of her friends and I'd think, well, I don't think they're a good influence on her. And even if it came from a place of care, I realized that wasn't my position. Some of these friends had been in her life far longer than I'd been in her life.
Wow. That whole paradigm of ownership versus partnership.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I hope that's a ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
Is somebody controlling you and trying to change you and own what you're doing? Or are they truly in partnership, supporting you with your goals
Yeah.
and hearing you?
And it applies the other way too, Mel. I think a lot of us who are in personal growth who are in self-development, we have a bad habit of wanting to improve our partners, but not in the way they want, in the way we want. The amount of people that come to me and say, Jay, I'm like really begging my partner to read your book. And I'm like, please don't. Like, please don't. I mean it, because I want you to actually stay together. And maybe what they need to do is they need to watch one of my interviews with an athlete they love. Maybe that's what they need to do. Maybe
Right.
they don't even need to learn from me. Maybe they need to learn from a completely different person. Maybe it's one of our friends. Maybe it's someone else. Maybe it's someone from decades ago. The point is, are you trying to get them to the next step in their journey, or are you trying to get them to the next step in your journey?
Oh, okay. Hold on, everybody. Did you just hear that? Because that is
Does this
literally,
make me laugh?
that's it. No,
Yeah.
but so like
Yeah.
I really like to stop
Yeah, no, it's
because
beautiful. You do it so well.
I
You
just
do it so well.
want everybody listening to get the wisdom that you are weaving together, because I think that's it right there. Are you trying to get them to step forward? You said it better.
Yeah.
Something
And I
about
was
like you're
saying, are you trying to get them to the next step in their journey, or are you trying to get them to the next step in your journey? So you may love listening to me and Mel, and that's beautiful, and I love that. And if your partner loves listening to me and Mel too, awesome. But chances are they might like learning from a different voice and a different coach and a different teacher and a different guide. And guess what? That's okay, because what inspires them may be completely different. I've had clients before where I'm working with the wife or I'm working with the husband, and they want me to work with each other. And I'll say, if they want to, if that person wants to learn from me, I'm all for it. But we have to allow people to select their own mentors. We have to allow people to select their own path. And by the way, I'll give an example. There's a couple that I know, and one of them finds knowledge and learning to be what growth means to them,
mm-hmm.
and one of them finds service. So one of them will happily go to a soup kitchen, a homeless shelter, and help out every week. And to them, that's growth. And to the other person, reading books, listening to podcasts, trying to study and be better is their form of growth. Now, could we honestly say one is better than the other? No, it's just two different paths, and probably they'll cross at one point if we don't push the other person away. But sometimes we push away the other person so far that our paths of growth never get to come together.
Yes, and I think you also have to be present enough to know when someone that you quote love is pushing you off your path.
Mm-hmm.
That you're busy supporting them on theirs, but they are not meeting you
Yeah.
halfway. I want to start with a particular post that you put on social media that went crazy viral, and it really struck a nerve for me. And you posted this thing where you said, at 32 years old, I realized I was a child in an adult body. And this just hit deep for so many people. What did you mean?
What I thank you for calling out that post. I think, for a lot of us that can be really challenging to hear that about ourselves. And for me, if I'm speaking honestly, it was very challenging to come to that awareness. And what I met was mainly around my emotions and the way that I hadn't learned, of course, in early childhood, to tolerate, to navigate, to be able to process my emotions. And in many ways, and I use this language, I think this is the part that becomes difficult, is in a lot of ways, I was very emotionally immature in the way that I handled the frustrations, the difficulties, and the stresses of life. Because the reality for me, as I think is the case, which is I think why it resonates with so many of us, is that so few of us, for many different reasons, which I'm sure we'll dive into many of which today, we didn't have those safe environments. We didn't have those emotionally attuned caregivers who themselves learned how to navigate their own emotions. So, I mean, needless to say, parenting is a large task in and of itself. And, when we don't have that safety and when we don't have someone modeling, mirroring, attuning to us emotionally, what we do then appear is like a child in an adult body.
I want to take a step back, because for those of you who have not read Dr. Nicole's New York Times #1 best-selling book, which is a game changer, How to Do the Work, or you don't follow her online like millions and millions and millions of people do, Can you tell everybody what your life looked like at the age of 32? Because, when you talk about emotional immaturity, it's not like you were running down the street naked, taking a baseball bat to the side of a wall, like kind of rambling gobbledygook. You were high functioning and successful. So we just give everybody, like, what does life for Dr. Nicole at 32 look like when you have this realization that, holy shit, I can't process my emotions maturely?
Yeah, and I'll be the first to say I wasn't able to even admit that or even have that language for what was going on at the time. What I did know was that I had finally arrived, or so I thought, to the end of all of this, achievement-based to-do list. To speak to your point, I wasn't, kind of dysfunctional in the very traditional sense. I had, in a lot of ways, I had the successful life, or at least appearance of life around me. I was in a partnership, a committed partnership. I had a successful practice after achieving my PhD. I was surrounded by, a network of supportive individuals. I was living in the city that I chose to live in. Everything seemingly on the outside, right, was reflecting this idea that I should feel good, or at least better than I was. So I think, as a lot of us do, my first feeling was a really low, disempowered, lack of fulfillment and shame. Because again, as I looked around, I kept almost telling myself, well, what is wrong with you, Nicole? Why aren't you, feeling good about yourself? Why aren't you feeling fulfilled? Why aren't you feeling even connected to this life that you created? So not having the awareness of why I was struggling right alongside with, at that point, the clients that I had been working with week after week, month after month, I wondering, feeling as a disempowered then clinician in the room, what is wrong? Why are so many of us stuck? Those of us who even have access to supportive individuals like myself in a therapeutic environment, why is the report I'm getting week after week not that I'm getting better, but that I'm getting more and more frustrated, more and more shameful, more and more stuck in these patterns? And for me, it really began with exploring, what is keeping so many of us stuck. And for me, I landed on the answer being all of the conditioning, oftentimes very stress-based, very trauma-based conditioning that, was emblematic of the childhoods that most of us have grown up in, that were creating habits and patterns that, no matter how much insight, how much awareness that we had, were keeping us disconnected from ourselves, from our life, and from our relationships.
So, as you are talking and somebody's listening intently, going, wait a minute, is there a different way to experience life? Because adulthood, it's so familiar sounding that you check all the boxes. Ivy League degree, you're practicing psychologist, you are successful on the outside, you're surrounded by all these people, and you're having this internal crisis and disconnect where you're going, why am I not happy? What is wrong with me? What more could there be? How can I not figure this out? I am sure most everybody listening can relate to this. And so we're going to get into what you did. But if somebody is going, that's me right now. What is something, Dr. Nicole, that you want to tell them right now about what this means if you're experiencing this disconnection from what your life is like today and what you're feeling inside?
I speaking from the perspective of having been that person. I mean, as I, was entering my 30s, I convinced myself, because I too saw similar, complaints. I heard similar complaints, and I almost gaslit myself in a lot of ways with this idea, like you're sharing, Mel, of this must be just what adulthood is. This might just be the circumstances of the, environments, very unnatural. I was living in a city myself that many of us are living. And it took me, becoming conscious again of the very real impact of these habits and patterns to create just that little bit of space. So what I want to offer to anyone who's resonating and has that embedded belief that this is just what life is about, or maybe, a more problematic belief, I think, for ourselves is maybe this is just what my life is meant to be about. Maybe there's something inherently wrong with me, that is translating to this lack of fulfillment, this overwhelming stress, or whatever it might be for you. And so, very much speaking from that person as well, I thought that something was just, off about me. I want to share, the hope of creating that space of really, and you'll often hear me break down, as far as I see the process of creating change, into two major steps. And the first step I will always note is becoming conscious. And when we become conscious of how habitual, how patterned we are as individuals, then some of us can gift us with that little bit of space that then allows us to take that next step, which is beginning to make new choices outside of those old ingrained habits, to then be able to experience ourselves differently. And I'm really being intentional with that, because again, I think the best shifting of beliefs is when we ourselves begin to create change, begin to experience life differently. Many of us, I'm sure, have listened to motivational speakers who have said, "Oh, you can do this, come on this side of life, of change." And it really isn't. And again, speaking from my own experience of this, we don't believe it until we do it. But when we do become conscious, or as we begin to become conscious, we can gift ourselves with that space. Of course, does not happen overnight, but over time, we can begin to then make new choices, relieving ourselves of that shame, that belief that this is just what life is all about, and or this is what my life is all about.
Well, this is one of the reasons why I love you so much. Not only because you've made a huge difference in my life, and I'm going to try to take a highlighter and call out a couple of those things that you have said that were complete paradigm shifters for me and helped me achieve level up moments in my own healing. And so I want to I want to make sure everybody heard something, which is even the awareness that you feel stuck, even the awareness that something is off, even the awareness that this isn't working is great news. Because if I'm hearing you correctly, being frustrated or feeling discombobulated in your body about your life, that is the consciousness that you're talking about?
Yes, 100%. I mean, anything that we can attune to feeling, even the lack of, because I know for a lot of us, we feel numb. For me, that was very much part of my journey, is feeling apathetic, not actually feeling much of anything. Though, to speak to your, very beautiful celebration of that awareness, the moment we start to say, okay, I don't feel anything, or I feel so depressed, or whatever it is that I do feel, when I am able to see or witness, that's what consciousness means for me, and honestly acknowledge that that's the case for my circumstances, then we are actually beginning the process of creating change.
Yeah, this is going on right now in real time in my life because we were just having dinner last night for my husband's birthday, and our daughter has asked my husband, "When do you feel most alive? What experiences make you feel most alive?" And after Chris answered, I turned to her and I said, "I've heard you say that word alive a number of times. Where is that coming from?" And she said, "Well, it's because I don't feel that alive in my life right now." And I think when you have those insights, you're right to go, I was celebratory because I'm trying to highlight the fact that most of us react to that insight that, holy shit, I don't feel excited by my life. I don't feel like myself. I don't feel alive. It's scary when you have that moment of consciousness.
It's incredibly scary, feeling, as many of us do when we're on that blind autopilot, especially if our autopilot is driven by a state of nervous system disconnection. I often connect many of the conversations, many of the habits and patterns that we're beginning to talk about now back to our physiological body. And there actually is a state of shutdown that many of us, I found myself living in, that created, and it wasn't to say like we were going back to the beginning, right? I was still marching through life, checking endless boxes of to-do list. It wasn't that I was apathetic sitting on a couch, though. For some of us, that's how it presents. We don't feel motivated. We procrastinate. We actually can't get up and do much of anything, though some of us are still able to continue to literally just live life going through the motions. And our emotions are what makes us a human. So feeling very much, I talk about my spaceship, that I was living on, the spaceship of disconnection that again began for me in childhood, does create this feeling, this embodied existence of living like a robot. So when we rob ourselves of our emotional experience of life, we're robbing ourselves, in my opinion, of life itself. But again, as often is the case, there are reasons embedded in our mind and our body that have created that experience, even of that distance, that disconnect, that apathy, that lack of motivation, that procrastination, whatever it is, that isn't a reflection of who you really are, what is meant for you in life, but again, is an adaptive coping mechanism, usually around your earliest environments or circumstances.
Today's topic is the 3 lessons that I have learned from one of the hardest years of my life. And I wanted to do a episode about the lessons that I've learned recently, because this has been a really freaking hard year for me. And there are so many of you that listen to this podcast that are new friends of mine that have met me after the podcast is launched. And you may find it surprising to hear that this has been a really, like, I'm talking, if I had to rate 0 to 10, how hard it was, 0 being this was a cakewalk, 10 being this sucked sour eggs. This year would be about a 97 on a scale from 0 to 10. And if you listen to me today, you think, well, how could that possibly be? You've got one of the top ranking podcasts in the world. You've come out of nowhere and are just crushing it, Mel. You seem to have it all going on. You're clearly a very positive person. How could this possibly have been the hardest year of your life? Well, you're seeing me after the hardest year. And, you know, when you think about a lot of the kind of cheesy metaphors in life, it's always the darkest right before dawn. It's always hard right before it gets easy. And I think one of the things that's true about life is that life requires you to get lost right before you find yourself again. And I'm not going to lie to you, it sucks when you feel loss. It sucks when life is hard. There is nothing fun about it. I do not wish it on anybody. And I also know that it is unavoidable, that there are going to be years of your life that are absolutely amazing and delicious and easy, and they're going to just flow like water flows out of a faucet. And then there are going to be years like the year I just had that nearly suck you dry. It's like the hits just keep coming. And so I'm going to just at a top level tell you some of the reasons why this year was super hard for me. And even preparing to talk to you about this, thinking about what life looked like just over a year ago, I started to get emotionally triggered. Just talking about how hard it's been makes me feel stressed out again. So, let me just kind of go back, about a year. So a year from now, I was so burnt out. I had been running on adrenaline for years. The more successful I became, the more unhappy I was. For 2 years, I had been living separately from my husband and our son because we had raised our kids in Boston, and that's where my business was. And during the pandemic, remember that? During the pandemic, our son made this decision that he wanted to go to school in southern Vermont. And so my husband and our son were living with my mother-in-law, and he was going to the public school 3 hours away from me in southern Vermont. And I was down in Boston working. And so I was living alone. I was not near my husband and son. I would see them on the weekends. I was driving back and forth, and it was just beating me up. On top of that, there was some stuff going down at work that was super painful. I had somebody very close to me that betrayed me. I mean, they stole from me, they lied to me, And it had been going on for a while, and it all kind of blew up a year ago. And so here I am feeling lonely, feeling burnt out. I'm looking at a massive betrayal. And I don't know if any of you have ever had that experience where somebody deeply in your inner circle steals from you, lies to you, does something to you like that. But it just takes you to your knees. And I was super just unhealthy. I had not been exercising consistently. I was grabbing the alcohol to relieve the stress and loneliness. And in preparing to talk to you about this today, I went back through my camera roll and back through my calendar. And, it's a wake-up call because you kind of forget how bad things are once you get through it. I mean, when you're in the soup of it, you feel like you're drowning in sludge. But when you get through it, it's almost like after you have a baby, you forget the pain of labor. Looking back at my photos from last year, seeing me so worn down, I looked so pale. I looked like a dolphin. You know how dolphins have gray skin? I had no brightness to my face. The life force was just drained out of me. And, that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg. I was in therapy. I was trying to sort stuff out, but I was just miserable. And if I'm being honest, I had been miserable for a while. I had just been pushing through. Life felt very hard. And I knew deep down that something had to give. I knew that I could not continue to go on living separate from Chris and Oak, going back and forth, feeling so burnt out, surrounding myself with friendships or relationships where I wasn't feeling supported. I was actually getting betrayed. And I knew I had to do something. And it may surprise you to hear me say, I just felt stuck. And I had all these excuses for why I had to keep going and all these excuses for why I, couldn't change things. And I also felt like this was getting done to me. I don't know if you've ever heard that quote that, oh, life is happening for you. I hate that quote because I'm like, no, it's not. Life is happening to me. Don't tell me when my life isn't working that this is happening for me. Screw you. Well, then something happened. What happened is in December, I had a conversation with a really good friend of mine. And my friend's name is Pete Sheehan, and he's known me for a long time. And he said, Mel, you are more miserable than I have ever heard you. And I think that it's time that you truly get control of this, that you focus on your happiness, that you make some serious changes. This is something that I think everybody should hear because I am going to try to explain a breakthrough that I am having that is unfolding in real time about my relationship to complaining and my relationship to suffering and how that robs me of happiness. And here's what happened this morning. I woke up and I felt this incredible flood of happiness and joy and gratitude because all three of our kids are home. And nothing makes me happier than when Chris and I are here at home and all three kids are here and we as a family are together. And so I feel this wave of joy. And almost immediately, a second wave came and washed over the joy and just washed it right out. And the wave that came over me was sadness and grief that they were going to be leaving in 3 or 4 days. I just felt this heartbreak hit.
That wasn't even happening in the moment.
No.
Right. Anticipatory heartbreak.
And they just got here. Yeah.
And they just got here.
Right.
And it was so acute. And so I laid there for a minute and I thought, holy cow, why am I sad? I mean, they're here. And then, of course, I rolled over to kind of explain this to Chris, and he had been up for 2 hours. So there, that the bed was empty. And I get up, I brush my teeth. I'm kind of thinking about this. And then I get a text from you, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
And every morning, Amy pulls a card for me. And if you don't know what pulling a card is, you will, because we are going to lean into this at the Mel Robbins podcast. She pulls a card, and it's a mindfulness practice. It's a way to get guidance from the universe, from universal truth. It's a way to tap into faith and magic in your life. And so I've become basically addicted to checking my phone after my morning routine and seeing what card Amy has pulled for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so Amy has a gift, because every damn time you pull a card, it's like some portal opens up and I am hit with divine wisdom. Don't you feel that way, Jessie?
Yes. And I don't even tell her.
What do you mean you don't even
She
tell
doesn't
her?
even need to know what's going on. She just gets the right card that is exactly what you need.
Yes. So here I am
Thank
in
you.
this inquiry with myself about joy, grief, happiness, sadness, love, and loss, like just in it with myself. And so I check my phone, and Amy has pulled a card for me, and she has texted me the card, and she has texted me the description of what it was. And one of the things that I love about you, Amy, is that you not only text the card, but my favorite part is not the card. My favorite part is your enthusiasm about the card that you have pulled, right, Jessie?
Yep. And how you spit it back out to us.
Yes. Like she literally goes, "This is your card, baby. Get ready for this incredible message." And then she goes, "This is the card you and I pulled back in July." I'm like, how the hell do you remember this?
I do. Well, because number one, this card I feel like there's a very strong connection to you and this card for a lot of different reasons. But you did get this card in July, but then you got it again when we were doing another reading for you, a past, present, future reading. And this was your future card. So this is always where you're going and where you are if you allow all of that like negative shit to go by the wayside.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you
anyway.
wrote, "I consider it the Mel card."
Yeah. I
And
do.
then you told me the message, and the card is the Garden of Venus. Why don't you tell me what this card means? Like, what does this card
This card
mean?
has really deep meaning. And so immediately when I saw it, when you do these oracle cards, when you pull them for yourself or for other people, first of all, I get very much into your energy, and I ask for your guidance to come through.
Okay.
Not my own guidance, just for you. And so then you just kind of like let your senses take over. And the very first thing I saw was that there is a heart on this card that might not be seen by everyone. It's not the first thing that would jump out to everyone, but there is a heart on this card.
Yeah,
and that
because it's a picture, guys. Garden of Venus, beautiful garden. In the center is a huge white glowing opening.
yeah.
And that's what I looked at. I didn't even notice that there was a heart on that card.
Yeah, well, that's really positive that you looked at that white opening, because that is what's happening. There's like a big opening for you happening right now. So anyway, this card is about a bunch of different things, as these cards always are. And whenever you pull them, there's always a different message. But for me, immediately that message of just love and happiness and rest and enjoying what you've created came through for me. That's how I immediately felt for you. The description talks, however, about something that I think is really important, that maybe is what you latched onto. You want me to read it so that you can?
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could read it for everybody.
There is a part. It talks about the sword and the mirror. I'll just kind of summarize it really quickly. The sword is you always needing to defend yourself, your point of view, your judgments, the way you are. That's the sword. It's like you're constantly in battle with yourself, with other people, with society, with money, with, whatever it is. Like you're just always defending. And that's, I think a lot of us have that natural posture in life. Just back off or don't hurt me.
Or how hard things are, gripping or fighting.
It's gotta
like the
be
fight.
hard,
Yeah.
fighting. Yeah, all of that. And it asks you to put down the sword and pick up the mirror and look at the beauty that you are, the natural state of who you are. And that's what we kind of talked about in this text chain that we had this morning. Like, this is your natural state of beauty and peace and love. And when you're so worried about what the sword's doing, you don't take time to accept that about yourself.
What I got in this moment, hearing you say that, is that the constant fighting with myself or fighting against the way things are, the way that they should be, is robbing me of this experience of love and happiness and joy.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I wanted to share with both of you and with you listening to us right now is that I had this insane breakthrough this morning. And I've been working on this breakthrough for 2 years because, you know, in the middle of, you know, the big kind of sea, I don't even want to say the word anymore, that
Right.
where we were all, you know, locked up in our homes, I just had a reckoning with myself in front of a mirror. And I looked at myself and was like, you're miserable. And the harder you work and the busier you get, the more unhappy you are. And you've got to start to take your happiness seriously, Mel.
Mm.
You've got to figure out how to be happy. And that might come as a surprise, you know, for you to hear as you're listening to Amy and Jesse and I talk to you, that I, at a baseline, was not a content or happy person. And Chris would always say to me, God, you're always like focused on what's wrong. It's never enough. It's never this. And I would reject that. Full stop. I'd be like, no, I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a really grateful person, which I am.
Mhm.
I'm a really positive person, which I am. I'm a really like, you know, I have happy times. I am like, I'm not always, I couldn't even see it.
Yeah.
And so here's the major breakthrough I had this morning around waking up and having a wave of joy because all 3 kids are home and our family's together. Then it immediately being wiped away by grief and loss and fear and upset that, oh, no, they're going to leave.
Mm-hmm.
The mirror and my true nature is the love and the joy. And the second that the gripping and the fear and the but they're leaving and the this and the that, that's me picking up the sword. And I had this realization that, oh my God, I don't even realize how much I'm battling happiness inside myself. It's like this campaign and this campaign of misery. Like I pick up the sword, I start wielding it, and I'm fighting for misery.
Yeah. And there's always, when you have a sword in your hand, there's always something to fight.
Yes, and here's the thing. When I'm thinking about the kids leaving in 4 days, I'm not actually experiencing them being here.
No.
Right.
Right.
And then they're
Yeah.
going to leave, and then I'm going to be thinking about when they come back.
You're not present
And
to
I'm not
the joy.
present to the joy.
Yeah,
So I'm experiencing it on the surface. We laugh, we dance, we do this.
Yeah.
But deep down, I am engaged in a campaign of misery.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because my mom is always focused on like what's not working. And she has bursts of happiness, and I so like want her to be happy, and there's always something wrong. And it's as if I learned to speak both English and I also learned to pick up the sword and look for what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm learning as I work on myself is I'm learning that that's not the language that I want to speak anymore. That thing, the complaining that I heard, or the griping or the upset or the sadness or whatever it was, that constant campaign, that pick up the sword, don't get too happy, something's wrong, you want to go out to dinner, but I want to cook something. I can see you getting emotional,
Jesse,
Jesse. What's going on?
It was the 2 languages that you just said.
Yeah.
You just battle all the time with it. I get it.
Yeah.
That
and when
hit home.
I think we should call it the mother tongue.
Yeah.
That is the truth. Because to talk to your mom, you had to speak her language of, isn't this horrible? Look at your
Yes.
father. Oh my God. Prices have risen again. Can you believe my mom would always say holidays are women killers. I know. So she said that.
Wow.
She said and I had to kind of embrace that. And
Well,
Jesse and I were
did you
just,
also like go to the like, okay, I'm going to try to fix it. I'll try to make you happy. I'll try to.
Sure. It's our duty to fix it. We don't know any better as little kids. That's what we think. It's our duty to fix it. So pick up the baby sword.
And to fix it, you say, yeah, it is terrible.
It
Mom.
is terrible.
It is so, can you believe that?
Yes, because that was something that I always did too, and maybe you guys did. I never wanted to betray my mother's sense of safety in the world and like have her feel unstable and have her take that out on me. So it was like I was always agreeing with the crazy that came out of her mouth. Like
Keep
I was
the peace.
keeping the peace. Oh yeah, and part of it, like Mel, when you say the mother tongue, part of it is that you it really was a language that you spoke and you didn't know any better. It wasn't like you were pretending. Like
Right.
you literally did not know
No.
any different.
Well, and same with her. Like my mom did not grow up in a loving household.
Right.
It was a super hardworking farming family. And, you know, I'm of course feeling terrified that when my mother listens to this, she's going to be super pissed off at me. And so I still have to say this because I don't want complaining or being present to what's wrong to rob me of experiences of joy. I do not want to be sitting here in my life right now where I can look in the mirror and I can experience these next 4 days. And instead, what the old me would do is I would be already in my head, living in the reality that they're leaving and telling myself a story. We don't live near our kids and I'm never going to see them again and something's wrong here. And I would bring that energy into my day-to-day life. And I don't want to do that. Like, I want to put the sword down. I want to experience my life day to day and not be searching for what's wrong and not be engaged in my own private campaign of, you know, this isn't happening this way and that is. And like, even right now, like we're recording this profound conversation and Eric and Brian are banging nails on the shed outside.
We're banging it out up here.
Yeah, we're banging it out up
and
here. You know, like
thinking.
there's my mind searching for, oh, well, this, stop it, Mel.
Right.
Stop it, because you may not have realized that it was a second language that you're constantly speaking. Just like if your primary language that was spoken in your house was Spanish or it was Russian, you speak that fluently. And then if you, like, I feel like all of us have a verbal language and we have a subconscious emotional language. And I was sharing this breakthrough with Chris this morning. So he said this to me. He said, you know, so are you saying that in public you're a very happy, positive person, but in private you're sad and miserable? I'm like, no, it's way deeper than that. On the surface, I speak English and I am a happy, positive, optimistic person. Because I am.
Yeah.
But deep down in the depths of my subconscious, there is another language that I am speaking. And I've labeled it a campaign of misery. And even if you don't identify with this notion of looking for what's wrong or arguing against your own happiness, everybody can relate to this idea that, you know, as you're ready to go on vacation and you're at work, you're thinking about vacation. As you're on vacation, what are you thinking about? Getting back to work.
Back to work.
Right. And for me, that sort of internal, always on subconscious emotional dialogue is to search for something that is wrong right now or is about to go wrong. And in this moment, there is nothing wrong. In fact, I am living my greatest day ever because I'm here with you two, who I love. We're doing work that makes an impact that we fucking love.
Yeah.
Downstairs, I hear the voices of the people I love the most, and we're all together for 3 or 4 delicious days. And happiness and contentment requires you to look in the mirror and be where your feet are and let that joy and happiness flood in and not pick up the sword and gut the happiness by going, but this, but the rest, but the reservation, but they're running late, but the traffic, but this, but they're leaving, but someone's like,
Yep. If you're always looking for something wrong, you'll find it.
yeah. And I
Right.
never realized the extent to which that was my default.
Well, and also I want to say it is your default because it was what you needed to do, but it is not who you are, like at a soul level, right? It is not like truly who you are. It is just like that language, right?
Yeah.
Like when you say subconsciously, yes, that's true. You subconsciously you do that, but on a soul level, none of us are like that. Like we're all, this Garden of Venus state, which
Yeah.
is like,
Well, that's how we were
joy,
born.
peace. Yeah.
And that's who you
exactly.
are. You're
Yeah.
wired for joy. That's why you
wired
miss
for
it.
Yeah.
You're
Yes.
wired for happiness. That's why you miss it. You're wired for connection. That's why you miss it when you don't have it. You're wired for love. That is your natural state. And one other thing I want to say, because while it sounds like, oh, blame your parents, it's actually everything. It's what life does to you. It's the fact that as you go through life and you grow up, and especially, all three of us have survived childhood trauma. All three of us have, nervous systems that quickly jump to anxiety. All three of us anticipate what could go wrong as a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
And most of our parents are wired that way too. And we have an opportunity, every single one of us, to break that chain of speaking at a default level to ourselves about what's wrong, about what's not working. We have the ability to separate the language you speak with your mouth from the one that you feel in your body at a subconscious level.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a great way to put it.
How are you going to do that now?
I have no fucking idea.
Well, like, how do you put down the sword?
Yeah.
Chris asked me the same question because I didn't put it in the language of the sword, but he's like, how are you going to change this? I'm like, I have been, first of all, I got to be nice to myself, and I've got to bring compassion both to me and anybody that is in my family or around me that engages unknowingly in their own campaign of misery. Secondly, I said to Chris this morning, I'm 54. It is as fluent inside of me as English. And I can learn a new language. But just like learning a new language requires you to practice it every day, and you'll slip into English if that's your default, or you slip into Russian or Spanish if that's your default, I got to make a commitment to myself to practice speaking and encoding and learning a different subconscious emotional language.
Yeah.
And that when I slip into the one that I learned and have practiced forever, it's an emotional subconscious default that you have had since before you could put words together. We learned this from Dr. Becky. That from 0 to 5, before you've got your own words and sentence structure and ability to truly describe the world around you, you are absorbing while your brain is in a theta state, which is a state of hyper learning, like a giant sponge. This is why little kids can learn a second language like that. You're always learning 2 languages when you're born. You're learning the one that's spoken out loud, and you're learning the emotional language that is deeper underneath it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, your question, Jesse, how am I have no fucking idea. I guess I'm going to write about it in my journal every day. I'm going to keep talking about it. I'm going to catch those moments where the wave that is positive, that I feel myself picking up the sword and gutting it. And I see it everywhere. I see it in work. I see it in, even with the podcast, we came out of the gates and this has been so wildly successful and the downloads grow every day and it's just been extraordinary. And there's like, I instead of basking in, wow, like we're making a difference. This is resonating with people. I feel that. And then I see myself pick up the sword and I'm like,
Right.
it's temporary. It's luck. You're going to plummet off those. And then I'm like, ah.
Right.
And then I come from fear instead of coming
Right.
from my
Yeah.
natural state, which is
Yes.
I just want to have these conversations that allow us to share our lives with people and connect more deeply and that make a difference for all of us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. How would you guys like, I mean, first of all, what
Well-
resonates with you about the language you speak versus this second language that we all learn 2 languages
Yeah.
from birth?
I feel that. And I've felt that, I call it like my tribe language of how my parents talk about, you know, the big things like money and relationships and big life events, like how they view them.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed years ago that if I'm going to live the life that I want, I need to leave this tribe, not speak this language anymore. And I did a lot of research around that. And like, how do I do this? Because it's painful to extract yourself from this
Family.
from your family.
Do you think
basically.
that's what you experience? That is that sort of crunchy
Mhm.
kind of thing that everybody has, even though you may love your family deeply, that there is still this sort of mismatch
Yeah.
when you all get together because you're at different states
Yes.
of evolving
Right.
and different states of we all speak this language with words, but we are
Yes.
all engaged in learning a new language at a subconscious emotional level.
Yes,
Mhm.
we've all moved on in some way, but we have our family roles, we have our common language, we
Mhm.
have our tribal, you know, and I say tribal in the sense that like any group of 3 people that get together create a culture.
Oh, yeah,
in-
that's
in
the
and of
Seth
itself.
Godin research,
Yeah,
right?
Right,
Yep.
exactly. So yeah, I decided I don't want to do this anymore. I am grateful for it, you know, like Con Marie, like thank you for the lessons I've learned.
Yeah.
And I'm moving on here. I'm making a conscious decision to move on.
Well, you know what's also interesting is I think when you're present to it, Jesse and Amy, that, oh, okay, there's this thing I speak and then there's this thing I want to feel deeply.
Yeah.
And when you can get in touch with what is authentically who you are and what you want to feel, what I've noticed is I have a much easier time,
Mm-hmm.
not only with compassion and love, but with boundaries,
Yeah.
because I don't get hooked.
Oh,
Yeah.
the emotional hooking in that is that's
And
a big
that's
deal.
almost, that's a fluency, because if you've ever been around friends that are bilingual, so we have very close friends that she grew up in, her dad's from Jordan, her mom is French. And so she speaks fluent French and so does her husband, and the kids are bilingual, and we'll all be around them and super close family friends. Hi, Mark and Maheen. What I've noticed is when they're all talking to us, it's all English. If they turn and say something to one another, they speak in French, because
Yeah.
it's just like this thing. And I
Yeah.
think emotionally, we hook into each other's emotional languages by default.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Present day, my therapist, the GOAT, Keith, he's awesome. He's in California, so we Zoom. And he's just this like super chill, spiritual guy. Used to be a surfer. Like he's just like the coolest dude ever. And I love him because he's like such a smiley guy and he's just like fun, and he's taught me all this stuff. And so I guess this segue, and he basically like helped me. Actually, our beginning lessons were a lot on purpose and like what I am going to do about this thought process. And we came to the conclusion that, or I guess I came to the conclusion with his help, that life does not matter. But us as individuals can make it matter by using purpose and finding our purpose. And so what I discovered with him is that like these thoughts about life not mattering are going to be here. But that doesn't mean they're going to stay, because over time, when I live my life, I'm going to discover what the reason is, or the reason why I want to be here.
Yeah. And why you matter.
And it doesn't have to change anything, and it doesn't have to do anything, but I'm just like looking for my purpose and like my reason to be like, well, that's why I'm here. And that's why I want to live. And that's why like stuff like that.
So I just want to see if you can go a little deeper in explaining something. Because when you first started working with your therapist, Keith, you were in the middle of these catastrophic, kind of overwhelming, scary thoughts. And it's interesting that where you guys started was with the topic of purpose. And I understand that this was happening in parallel with a medical doctor giving you a antidepressant to kind of act like a ladder to help you stabilize.
Still on them.
Still on them,
Still
baby.
great. Still taking them. Guys, they're great.
Okay. But what was it about the topic of purpose that really helped you see your way through these scary and overwhelming thoughts? Because the other thing that I've read about the research of this is that this is very common, whether you're triggered by thinking about things like climate change, or if you're thinking about racism or systematic discrimination, or you are experiencing extreme poverty, or you lose somebody that you love, it can lead you to deeply contemplate the meaning of life. And people that are more empathetic or introverted tend to do this more, but it can happen to anybody. And so I found it really interesting that it was a conversation about purpose that helped you start to gain more control about the way that you were thinking. So can you explain how that helped you?
Yeah. I feel like what our conversation about purpose did for me was that even though at this point in time, I felt like life had no meaning and there was nothing to really like be alive for, the conversation about purpose kind of strengthened a thought in my mind about how that at one point in my life, I'll do something or I'll meet someone or I'll go somewhere that will just like give me this feeling of belonging and a reason to live and a reason to be here. And that will be like my reason to be on this earth. And like one day I'll be like, hey, this thing that I've discovered about myself that I really like is like my reason to be here. And this is why I'm on this earth.
Can I go a little deeper?
Yeah.
Because at the time that this was happening, how would you describe your relationship with your family?
Good.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like my relationship has always been good. So
Yeah.
it was good.
And did you have friends?
Plenty. I even had a girlfriend.
And did you enjoy school?
Loved it. Still do.
So the only thing about your life that wasn't working were these thoughts.
Yeah, these thoughts, it's not even that it fully clouded my judgment. I still loved my friends and you guys and everybody in my life, but I just didn't see why that mattered.
Because you have all this stuff handled, and now your mind is starting to take you to these dark places.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. And I think that's important because it just goes to show you, no matter what's happening on the outside in somebody's life, they seem like they're enjoying school. They have a great girlfriend. They've got good friends. They have a family that they're connected to. That their thoughts might actually still be a very scary place.
Yeah.
And I wanted to point that out because you just can't assume that you know what somebody's reality really is. I mean, I didn't even know.
Nobody did.
Not in ninth grade.
No. Well, yeah.
I mean, I knew very well in sophomore year.
Yeah.
But I also find it very interesting because when you believe that you are here for a reason and that your life is leading you somewhere, that there is something unique for you to discover that's on the road ahead. Might be tomorrow, might be a year from now, might be 10 years from now, might be longer from now.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of approaching life like it's almost like a gift that you unwrap
Mm-hmm.
to discover what's inside. That thought was like a seed that he planted that has taken root.
Yeah.
Because I hear you talking a lot, pretty frequently, about purpose.
It's like my personality now. All of my friends and like everybody I talk to, at some point, we always come into this conversation where I'm like, you know, I'm actually like, I don't see a reason to living and I'm actually looking for purpose. And they're like, what?
You're a really intellectual guy. Because I would label this an existential crisis, which is basically questioning existence.
Yeah.
That's what happened to you. And that happens to a lot of people. It's a very normal thing, and so are big and scary thoughts. Thank you for telling me that. Hey, it's Mel. Thank you so much for checking this video out. And if you like this one, I have a feeling you're going to like this one too. I'll see you there.